as writers, we often forget or are told to ignore the emotional impact that we have on our audience. This comes into play especially when we're writing out a character. As in this video, I'm gonna do a little spoiler alert. There are gonna be big spoilers in this one because we're talking about character deaths. So I will be spoiling the plots of Arcane Season 2, the Supernatural finale, Little Women, Dead Poet Society, Avengers Endgame, and Doctor Who Season 3. Hello everyone, I'm Bridget. I am a writer and filmmaker, and I'm here to help you write the most intriguing, the most authentic, and exciting stories you possibly can. And in this video, we're going to be talking about 6 ways of how to bring your characters' exit from your story from disappointing and frustrating to satisfying and serving a greater purpose. So let's get into it. Part 1, this isn't foreshadowing, it's just insensitive. Now, I've developed something of a pet peeve recently, probably over the last 5 years, about character deaths that just seem pointless. This came to the surface when I watched the Arcane Season 2 finale, and it really brought back some trauma related to the Supernatural finale, which we are going to be talking about right now, because the whole idea of having a character sacrifice themselves or die just for no reason is not narratively interesting. In the case of both of these finales, there is one thing that I think we all need to be very aware of, and that is the language and the backstory of these characters that we are killing off in our stories. Because in the case of both Dean Winchester and Jinx, but I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that Jace and Victor also died in the Season 2 finale of Arcane. I could be wrong, but maybe. But this point still extends to them, so I'm gonna, even if they didn't die, if they did, I'm like, well, it proves my point even more. The fact that both Dean Winchester and Jinx had attempted several times to themselves really makes them being the ones to die at the end send a very harsh message to the audience. The fact that the characters who are struggling the most psychologically and literally tried to do that to themselves several times is not, it really annoys me, because I think it really calls into question the sensitivity of these writers. And I think that really looking at how our writing can impact people who relate to our characters in the struggles that they are going through is really important to do. This did become more prominently, it did come to the forefront of my brain, in the aftermath of the Supernatural finale, as there was tons of campaigns about prevention and mental health and everything, and for that to be Dean's final moment, alive, was really painful for a lot of people. So I feel that this is something that we need to really pay attention to, and something that we need to be more aware of moving forward. Having these characters be mentally unstable or have some kind of ideation is not foreshadowing, it's just insensitive, as I said in the title of this section. Because foreshadowing, this isn't foreshadowing. This is just saying we want them to survive this, but they're not going to. And that does not send a good message to the audience. Now, at the end of each section, I'm going to give you a little actionable question/prompt. And the one for this section is Are you killing off the character who is struggling the most mentally? If so, think about that for a quick second. Maybe reconsider. Part 2, when to subvert expectations. Tone is always a huge part of your story, and your audience will develop associations with that tone. We know genres. We know stories that we've grown up with. We know cliches. So there will be expectations no matter what story you're telling. The thing about killing off characters, or if you choose to kill off a character, this could play into how you choose to kill them off. It could play into who you choose to. The idea of subverting expectations could be a fun experiment. Look at your characters and be like, maybe people expect this guy to die, but I'm gonna make it this other guy. And then it's gonna be like, whoa, what the heck? I didn't think he was gonna die. Yep, that would be subverting expectations. We are not moving on quite yet from Dean, Winchester, and Jinx, because I'm still upset. I do find with these two examples that the writers fully played into expectations with their ideations, with their attempts in the past. Everyone would expect them to be the ones to die. Believe me, while I was watching those finales, I was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. They did it. I think after a certain point, the audience becomes numb to, not to their, I don't want to say to their struggles, but the amount of times that a character almost does something, if they finally do it, it doesn't feel the same. The surprise has been taken away. And so if that character carries through on an action, it's like, okay, sure, they tried that before. And I'm not happy that they did it because it's not something that's good for them. I'm not gonna give another example of like characters dying in these particular shows, because I feel like in the case of Supernatural and Arcane, the most like surprising result would have been that everyone survives, that everyone is okay, because through the whole story, it is a story of bloodshed, it's a story of violence, and so having everyone be able to have a somewhat normal life would have been the most surprising thing. And being able to see that they will live on in a certain capacity would be the most subverting of expectations. But as I say, if you are determined to kill off a character, try picking someone who the audience is attached to, but try and make it as surprising as possible. Try and make it something that comes out of nowhere or comes out of nowhere and affects all the other characters for a long time afterwards. Because the death of a character should never be about shock. It needs to be something that is like a domino. It needs to lead to more down the road. A character's death is like a giant turning point for all of your characters. It might be a midpoint in their big character arc. So treat it like that. If a character's family member dies, it could flip everything in their world on its head. So run with that. Your characters aren't going to be the same after this character dies. The actual question for this section is, how does this character's death affect all the other characters in your story? Part 3, undermining character development. We are not getting away from Jinx at all. It's like we're living in Arcane. So yes, we are going back to Jinx. Now, in season 2, we have the storyline of Jinx and Echo, especially in I think it's in like Act 2 and Act 3. We have the storyline of Jinx and Echo having something of a romance and having a bit more like a character dynamic that's not just like enemies. Jinx's death fully undermines the character development that we got between Jinx and Echo in the previous 2 episodes. because it just cuts it off. We literally had a scene where Echo stops Jinx from herself, and all of that was literally just for nothing, because it literally just delayed the effects. She was trying to do that and then ended up getting to do it. And I'm trying not to be like totally mad about it, but it's really pissed me off. Character development is something that is the backbone of your story and needs to be carefully crafted. When it comes to intertwining character arcs, you need to look at themes and lessons. So, what kind of theme or lesson are we dealing with in the case of Jinx and Echo? Echo has literally lost everyone in his life except for Vi. Vi is the one surviving person that he is like connected to. He lost his like father figure, he lost Vander, and the other guy, what was his name? Goggles dude. Feel bad. And then at the end he lost Jinx. This kid has gone through it, and his character development of opening up again through those 2 episodes just got stopped so short right at the end because she died. It was like, great, I shouldn't ever like connect with anyone ever again. I could totally see if they do another season, that's where he's gonna go. He's just gonna cut himself off from everybody in his life. Great, love that for him. And this is the case with Jinx as well. The whole idea of both of them having the lesson of learning to trust people again and open up emotionally is pretty clear. If I look at it, they are trying to have connection, and they find that in each other in the last 2 episodes, but it gets stopped when one of them dies and leaves the other one all alone. Now, okay, I'm gonna move on, maybe briefly, from Arcane, and we are gonna look at another example. We're gonna look at Little Women and the death of Beth March, because this is specifically the 2019 film version, because I haven't read the book, and so we're just gonna do that. I'm not gonna try and pretend that I know what happens in the book specifically. We're gonna go with Greta Gerwig's interpretation. And this example really shows changing the character arc through the death of a character. Because the death of Beth changes the dynamics between the sisters. Yes, they were always very close through their childhoods, but the main tension that we have is between Jo and Amy. And the death of their sister really brings Jo out of her like cocoon and makes her realize that she wants connection with people. She can't keep secluding herself, and so she decides not to be angry with Amy when she comes back and announces her engagement to Laurie. Now, the main difference, if we look at these examples side by side, is the time that is given after the character death. In the case of Little Women, in the book, I did not look at the movie. There's at least, okay, in the movie, there's at least half an hour, I think, after Beth dies that's left for the story. In the book, there is about 7 chapters left in the story. Whereas Jinx dies 6 minutes before the end of the show. Far less breathing room, let's say, guys. Far less breathing room, which is always fun. There's no time to fold in the death of Jinx into Echo's character arc, or Vi's character arc, or anybody. They get one last scene to mourn, and then that's it. Cut to black. Now, the actionable question for this section is, how does your character's death impact the arc of the other characters? How does it change their mentality and forward their lesson in the story? Part number 4, earning emotional payoff. The example I'm going to use for this section is Dead Poets Society, which I actually watched for the first time quite recently. Now, we've talked about having your character's death impact the other characters, but what I want to talk about in this section is earning the reaction of the other characters. So this is looking at how you're leading up to the character's death. In the case of Dead Poets Society, this is it's a great example of leading up to a character's death, because we get the introduction of Todd, we get the introduction of Neil, and I did have it spoiled for me at one point. I think it was through Friends, when one of the characters in like season 1 was talking about it, and they're like, oh, the kid dies, and you're like, oh yeah, okay. I was watching it going, I think it's him that dies. So I already knew pretty much that Neil was going to be the one who dies, and this made a lot of sense to me with how I could see Todd's character arc going. The introduction of Todd as this really introverted kid, and Neil as his kind of mentor and friend, the one who is pushing himself outside of social norms and the one that wants to be in the Dead Poet Society the most, he is the one who falls the furthest. And his emotional roller coaster just goes up, 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 and then plummets to the ground. But Todd, seeing all of this, is the one that is learning the lessons of standing up for what he believes in and not being afraid to be the one to stand out. Now, Neil's death pushes these characters into action mode, and especially with Todd. The others are a little bit more passive. They don't really want to push the social norms, and up until this point, Todd hasn't wanted to either. But the death of Neil really alters his personality so much, because he got so attached to Neil, and seeing him grow through being in the play and standing up to his family. The fact that his story ended so tragically pushes Todd to react in a way that is so visceral, and the idea of his friend and mentor being gone because of his family really turns his world upside down. And Todd is this character who hasn't to this point spoken up about anything. He doesn't want to speak in front of the class. He doesn't even want to speak in the Dead Poets Society, which is literally in a cave. But after Neil's death, it changes his character so completely, because he feels this sense of injustice and can't stand back anymore. And this leads to the famous "Oh Captain, my Captain" scene. Everything in your story needs to lead up to having this emotional payoff. If Todd and Neil didn't bond through the play and Neil teasing Todd about writing poetry and all these things, having them be very close friends, it would not have hit the same if they were just casual roommates. They were roommates. It would not have hit the same if they had just been like someone down the hall and he's like, oh, he's gone, oh no. It would not be the same unless they had that close relationship. On top of that, setting up that Todd does not want to speak in front of everyone. He doesn't want to speak in front of the class or anything like that, really makes him standing up on that desk, saying, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," in front of everyone and being told to sit the frick down, hits so much harder, because he would never have done that at the beginning of the film. Neil's death changes everything. The actionable question for this section is, how does your character's death impact the other people around them? How do they react specifically when they hear the news. Part 5, giving meaning. For this section, I want to use the example of Avengers Endgame and the death of Tony Stark. Sacrificing characters happens quite a lot in media. It is quite dramatic, it really pushes other characters forward, and it's just kind of like fun to watch. It sounds so wrong to say, but it is pretty interesting to watch. For Tony Stark, this moment is huge, and it is the moment that had everybody like stunned in silence or like screaming. I can't remember exactly. I think they were like, when he had the glove, it was like, I am Iron Man, snap. That A+. Now, the main reason that Tony's death isn't meaningless is because of his arc. The fact that he sacrifices himself for his family and bringing everybody back is so impactful, because he would not have done that as the character that we knew in Iron Man 1. The like playboy, just like having a good time, making this suit, and gets kidnapped, all that fun stuff. He would not have done that. Now, this is an arc that spread over several movies. The whole like Avengers catalog, from like, I think it was from Captain America to Avengers Endgame. That's the whole Avengers thingy. The whole arc of Tony was very centered on learning about selflessness and learning about doing the right thing, learning what is right and wrong in his mind and what he values overall, moving away from the cocky playboy, basically criminal, who is selling weapons to like warlords. I think it was unknowingly. I haven't watched Iron Man 1 in a very long time, but by the end, fighting for the survival of his family and basically half of the human race that was snapped out of existence, or, you know, every being in existence. I can't remember exactly what it was. With this, I want you to think about the context of your character's death. We've talked a lot about the lesson that they are learning, and that is crucial because your character's death is really the end of their arc. It is basically putting a punctuation point on their arc. It's saying, and we're done. So the actual question for this section is, how does your character's death finish their arc? That's it. What does it do? How does it finish it? Part 6, a fate worse than death. Now, this is one final section that I'm going to talk about alternatives to killing off your characters. And my main example is going to be Doctor Who Season 3, starring David Tennant, Freema Agyeman, and the character I'm going to be talking about is the Master, played by John Simm. So, I don't know why I put in the actors for that one and not any of the others, but let's roll with it. The Master coming back to life, you know, isn't new. He's done that so many times, but in the case of the 2005 revival, John Simm's iteration was the first one we were going to see in the show. So him coming back with a fate worse than death for him was him coming back, the Time Lords being dead, like gone, and him having this constant drumbeat inside his head. So he is fully alone, he has no idea what to do, and basically just goes around killing people because he's like being driven mad by this drumbeat in his head, which, yeah, I think that's pretty much a fate worse than death, guys. He was also sent out of the Time War against his will, and as we find out later, was used as a pawn to help the Time Lords escape the Time War. So, even more fate worse than death. I think that's pretty bad. Okay, the final actionable question. Is there a way your characters can survive? And would you give them a fate worse than death? Now I'm going to summarize all the points that I made in this video just so you can have a little flash of everything. Keep in mind how your character's death will impact your audience personally. Consider what your audience expects from your story and look into subverting expectations. Make sure their death does not cut off character development. Consider how the other characters will react to your character's death and how it will impact their lives moving forward. Your character's death is given meaning through their arc and how it is brought to a close. And finally, look into how you can avoid killing off your characters, either by a fate worse than death or by subverting expectations. That is everything for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful to you. If you want more tips on how to write better, I would encourage you to go sign up to my email newsletter. You can get a free workbook about building your writing confidence that will only take you 10 minutes, and it's completely free. So it's right down in the description. And without further ado, stay creative, keep writing, and I will catch you guys next week with another video. Bye.